Welcome back to Life Stories Network, the place where life's toughest moments turn into lessons that touch the heart. Today's story is raw, emotional, and very close to my heart. It is about the day my stepkids looked me in the eye and asked me to apologize to their dad. At first, I froze. I didn't even know what to say. But what happened after that dinner changed the way I see love, family, and my role in their lives forever. When I first became a step-parent, I thought I was ready to love the kids, ready to support them, ready to blend into this new family dynamic with open arms. But what no one tells you is that love in blended families doesn't always come easy. It's not like in the movies where kids welcome you instantly. No, it's complicated. It's layered. It's full of unspoken emotions, memories of the past, and loyalties that run deeper than words. From the very beginning, I knew one thing. I wasn't here to replace their father. That was never my goal. I just wanted to be present, to show them that I cared, to prove through my actions that I could be someone they could count on. If they needed help with homework, I was there. If they wanted someone to listen, I was there. If a school event came up and their mom couldn't make it, I stepped in, proud to cheer them on. But little did I know that every step I took forward also created a shadow behind Mia. Shadow of their father, who wasn't always there, but was still very much in their hearts. The day everything changed started like any other. We had just sat down for dinner. Their mom had made one of their favorite meals, pasta, with extra cheese, garlic bread on the side. Normally, our family dinners were lighthearted. We'd laugh, we'd talk about school, we'd share little stories, but that night, the energy was different. They had just come back from spending the weekend with their dad. I could tell by the way they sat at the table quiet, distant, that something was brewing inside them. Halfway through the meal, my stepdaughter, the oldest, put down her fork. She looked me straight in the eye, her voice calm but firm, and said, "You should apologize to Dad." My heart skipped a beat. For a second, I thought I had misheard. I blinked, waiting for her to explain. She didn't. She just stared, her eyes filled with something I couldn't quite read: anger, confusion, maybe even hurt. My stepson shifted uncomfortably in his seat, but didn't say a word. "Apologize? For what?" I finally asked, my voice softer than I expected. She crossed her arms and sighed. "For trying to be him. For taking his place at things. You should say sorry." Her words cut through me like glass. I sat there frozen, my fork halfway to my mouth, unable to process what she had just said. I wasn't trying to take his place. I wasn't trying to be their dad. But in her eyes, that's exactly what I had done. I looked at their mom, hoping for backup, for her to say something, anything. But she was just as stunned as I was. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. The silence was heavy, suffocating. I could feel my throat tightening as a wave of emotions washed over me: confusion, sadness, even guilt. That night, after the kids went upstairs, I broke down. I couldn't hold it in anymore. Tears ran down my face as I asked myself over and over, was I wrong? Had I been pushing too hard? All I wanted was to be there for them, but maybe in my effort to show up, I had overstepped. For the next few days, their words echoed in my mind like a drumbeat. Say sorry to Dad. I replayed every event, every moment where I had stepped in. Was I stealing something that wasn't Mina to Hebe? Was I unknowingly taking away their father's place? It tore me apart inside. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized it wasn't really about me versus their dad. It was about the kids, the loyalty tug-of-war they were caught in. They loved their dad. That love was deep, unshakable, and sacred. And as much as they cared for me, showing that care felt like betrayal to them. In their young hearts, loving me came with guilt. That S, when it hit me. The apology they wanted wasn't really for their dad. It was for them. They needed reassurance. They needed someone to acknowledge their feelings, their fears, their confusion. And as hard as it was, that someone had to be me. So, instead of apologizing to their dad, I chose another path. I decided to face the issue head-on with honesty, with vulnerability, and Wheatlow. I called for a family meeting. My heart pounded as I asked them to sit down with me and their mom. My voice shook, but I spoke from the deepest place in my soul. I told them, I will never replace your dad. He's your father, and nothing will ever change that. But I also want to be someone you can count on. If I've ever made you feel like I was stepping on his role, I need to know. Not because I'll stop crying, but because your feelings matter to me. At first, they didn't say much. My stepdaughter crossed her arms, her face guarded. My stepson fidgeted with his shirt. But as I continued, something shifted. I admitted to them, if my love ever made you feel guilty, I'm sorry. That was never my intention. You can love your dad and love me too. It's not a competition. Love doesn't run out, it multiplies. That was the first step in healing. Not an apology to their dad, but a heartfelt apology to the only people who truly needed to hear it. My stepkids. In that moment, it changed everything. After that family meeting, I felt both relief and uncertainty. Relief because I had finally spoken my truth, and uncertainty because I didn't know how the kids would process it. Parenting, especially. Step-parenting doesn't come with a handbook. Every word, every action, every moment feels like walking a tightrope. One wrong move, and you can lose their trust. That night, after the meeting, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. My partner was beside me, quiet, lost in her own thoughts. Finally, she whispered, "You did the right thing." But her voice carried a tremor of worry. I just don't know if they're ready to accept it yet. And she was right. The next morning, the kids acted normal on the surface. They got ready for school, joked about breakfast, and even smiled. But I could feel the tension underneath, like a river flowing quietly but powerfully beneath the ice. They were processing, trying to understand whether my words were real or just another adult attempt to smooth things over. 4 days, I tried to keep things steady. I helped with homework, cooked dinner, and drove them to school. I didn't push. I didn't force affection. I let them take the lead. Sometimes, my stepdaughter would watch me carefully, as though she was testing whether my words matched my actions. And honestly, I couldn't blame her. Trust isn't built in a single conversation. It's built over time, brick by brick, moment by moment. Then came the first test. My stepson had a soccer game at school. His dad wasn't around, and my partner had a work emergency. That left me. I asked gently, "Do you want me to come cheer you on? Or would you rather I sit this one out?" His eyes darted away, and for a moment, I thought he'd say no. But after a pause, he whispered, "You can come, but don't sit too close." I smiled and nodded. Deal. Deal. At the game, I sat a few rows back, clapping quietly whenever his team scored. I didn't yell. I didn't wave a banner. I didn't make it about me. But when he scored a goal and looked back at the stands, his eyes found mine. For just a second, he smiled. A small smile, but it was enough. It told me I hadn't lost him. When we got home, he didn't say much, but as he walked past me, he muttered, "Thanks for coming." My heart swelled. It wasn't much, but it was everything. Sometimes love isn't about grand gestures, it's about showing up in the smallest ways and letting kids know you're consistent. My stepdaughter, though, was a tougher case. She carried the weight of loyalty to her dad, like a badge. She wasn't ready to let go of that guilt. One evening, she came into the kitchen while I was washing dishes. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "Do you really mean it? That you're not trying to replace him?" I dried my hands and looked at her carefully. "I mean it with all my heart. Your dad is your dad. No one can ever take his place. I just want to be someone who cares about you. Someone you can count on. That's all." Her eyes softened for a moment, but she quickly turned away. "Okay," she said quietly, before heading upstairs. It wasn't acceptance, not yet, but it was a crack in the wall she had built around her heart. Later that week, something unexpected happened. Their dad came to pick them up. Normally, the exchange was quick. Bags by the door, hugs, and they were off. But this time, my stepdaughter paused. She looked at me, then at her dad, then back at me. Without saying a word, she walked over and hugged me before leaving. It was quick, almost awkward, But her dad saw it. I braced myself, expecting anger or resentment from him. But instead, he just nodded, his expression unreadable. Maybe he understood. Maybe it didn't he. But in that moment, it wasn't about him. It was about her. She was finally learning that loving me didn't mean betraying him. That weekend when the kids came back, something had shifted. My stepdaughter was quieter, but her guard wasn't as high. She sat with me while I cooked dinner, asking small questions about the recipe. My stepson asked if I could play video games with him. They weren't huge moments, but they were signs. Signs that maybe, just maybe, they were starting to trust again. But healing isn't a straight path. A few days later, tension rose again. During another dinner, my stepdaughter blurted out, "Dad thinks you're trying too hard." The word stung, even though I tried not to show it. I took a deep breath, set down my fork, and replied softly, "I understand why he might feel that way. But I promise, I'm not trying to take his place. I'm just trying to be here for you." She stared at me, searching my face for lies. After a long silence, she whispered, "I just don't want him to feel forgotten." That's when I realized the core of her pain. It wasn't about me being wrong. It was about her fear of letting her dad down. She loved him, and in her young mind, every ounce of affection she gave me was like stealing from him. My job wasn't to compete with that, it was to ease her guilt. So I leaned forward and said, "Loving me doesn't take anything away from him. Love isn't a pie where giving me a piece means he gets less. It's more like the sky big enough for everyone. You can love him fully and still care for me too. Both can exist." Her eyes watered, and she turned away quickly, not wanting me to see. But I did, and in that moment, I knew she was starting to believe me. Those weeks were some of the hardest of my life, filled with quiet battles and invisible walls. But slowly, we were building something stronger. Not by pretending the past didn't exist, not by erasing her dad, but by creating a space where both he and I could coexist in her heart without conflict. And for the first time, I realized something important. Being a step-parent isn't about trying to win love. It's about making sure the kids don't feel like they have to lose anyone in the process. Weeks passed after that fragile truce with my stepkids, and every day felt like a test. Some days were filled with small wins, like a smile across the dinner table, or a quiet thank you when I helped with schoolwork. Other days were filled with distant doors shut a little too quickly, eye rolls when I tried to join a conversation, or cold silences that lingered longer than usual. That's the reality of blended families. It's not a straight road. It's a winding, unpredictable journey where love has to be proven over and over again. One Saturday morning, I decided to take a different approach. Instead of waiting for the kids to open up to me, I thought maybe I could create moments where they'd feel safe enough to share. So, I suggested a family outing, a trip to the park. Nothing fancy, just a picnic and some time outdoors. Their mom was excited, but the kids were hesitant. "Do we have to?" my stepdaughter muttered, her tone laced with teenage resistance. My stepson shrugged, pretending not to care. But we went anyway. The weather was perfect, the kind of sunny day that felt like an invitation to let go of worries, at least for a while. We spread out a blanket, unpacked sandwiches, and for the first half hour, it was quiet. Too quiet. The kids scrolled through their phones, avoiding eye contact. I fought the urge to push, to force conversation. Instead, I waited. Finally, I spotted a soccer ball lying in the grass nearby. Without thinking, I picked it up and tossed it gently toward my stepson. "Bet you can't score past me," I teased with a grin. For the first time that day, he smirked. "Oh, I can." And just like that, we were running around the park, kicking the ball, laughing when I tripped over my own feet. His sister stayed on the blanket at first, rolling her eyes, but eventually, Sid joined in. The three of us ended up breathless, sprawled on the grass, laughing harder than we had in weeks. It was a small breakthrough, but it reminded me of something powerful. Sometimes connection doesn't come through words, it comes through shared moments, through laughter, through simply being. Later that evening, as we drove home, my stepdaughter quietly said, "That was fun." It wasn't much, but it was more than I had heard from her in days. My heart swelled with gratitude. Sometimes, One word is enough to keep you going. But as much as those moments gave me hope, there were still shadows lurking. One night, after the kids had gone to bed, my partner admitted something that shook me. She said their dad had called her upset. He had heard from the kids about the family meeting, about me saying sorry to them instead of him. "He feels like you're undermining him," she whispered carefully. My chest tightened. The last thing I wanted was to fuel conflict between their parents. That was never my intention. I stayed quiet for a long time before finally saying, "I can't apologize for something I didn't do wrong, but I also don't want to be the reason he feels threatened." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the balance I was trying to hold, the balance between loving the kids fully without making their dad feel erased. The balance between standing firm and stepping back. It was exhausting, and for the first time, I wondered if I was strong enough to keep walking this path. The next morning, I made a choice. I couldn't control what their dad thought of me, but I could control the way I showed up for the kids. I decided to lead with honesty. Always. No games. No pretending. Just real, raw truth. That opportunity came sooner than I expected. My stepdaughter had a school project, and she needed help building something for her science fair. Her dad wasn't around that week, so she hesitated before asking me. "I guess, if you're not too busy, maybe you could help," she muttered, almost embarrassed. I smiled softly. "Of course. I'd love to." We spent the whole evening working together, cutting cardboard, gluing pieces, testing designs. At first, she kept her distance, giving me instructions like I was just another set of hands. But slowly, she let her guard down. We laughed when the glue stuck to our fingers, celebrated when the project finally worked, and by the end, she looked at me differently. Not like an intruder, not like someone trying to replace her dad, but like a teammate. When we finished, she whispered, "Thanks. I know Dad would have helped if he was here, but I'm glad you did too." Her words pierced my heart. She wasn't choosing between us. She was finally realizing she didn't have to, and that was all I ever wanted. A few days later, she presented the project at school, and I was there in the audience, clapping quietly. I didn't shout, I didn't draw attention. I just smiled, proud of her. When she spotted me, she gave the smallest nod, a silent thank you. It was enough. That night, I realized something profound. Apologies are powerful, yes, but sometimes the real apology isn't in the words, it's in the actions that follow. It's improving over and over that your love is genuine, that your intentions are pure, and that you're not here to replace anyone you're here to add. Still, there were setbacks. There always are. One weekend, after visiting their dad, the kids came back colder than before. My stepdaughter barely spoke to me. My stepson refused to join family movie night. I felt the progress slipping through my fingers like sand. Later, I overheard my stepdaughter telling her mom, "Dad doesn't like how much we talk about him. He says it's like we're forgetting him." My chest ached. Here I was, trying my hardest, and still, it felt like I was walking against the wind. That night, I reminded myself of something important. I can't control their dad's feelings. I can't erase his insecurities. All I can do is keep showing up with love, patience, and honesty. The rest has to work itself out. So, I went back to the basics. Small gestures, gentle conversations. Respecting their space. Every day, I chose to love them, even when they resisted. Because love, real love, doesn't demand instant results. It waits. It endures. And slowly, I started to see the difference. My stepson asked me to practice soccer with him more often. My stepdaughter invited me to listen to her favorite music. Little by little, they let me into their world not as a replacement, but as an addition. And through it all, I realized something. The apology I gave my stepkids wasn't a one-time event. It was a living, breathing promise. A promise to never make them feel guilty for loving both of us. A promise to never force them to choose sides. A promise to always put their feelings first. That, more than anything, is what began to heal our family. Time has a way of revealing truths, especially in families. By the time months had passed since that first painful dinner where my stepkids asked me to apologize, our house had settled into a fragile rhythm. We were no longer in constant tension, but there were still unspoken questions hanging in the air, questions about loyalty, about love, about roles that none of us had fully defined yet. One evening, as I was cleaning up after dinner, my stepdaughter sat at the table, staring at her phone. She seemed upset, her brows furrowed, her jaw tight. I asked gently, "Everything okay, sis Rugib?" Avoiding eye contact. Then, after a long pause, she whispered, "Dad said you're trying to erase him." The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. I froze, the dish in my hand slipping slightly as my mind raced. I wanted to defend myself, to insist that I had never tried to erase anyone. But I stopped. Instead of reacting with anger, I took a deep breath and said, "I would never want that. He's your dad. Nothing could ever erase him from your life." She finally looked at me, her eyes wide with confusion. "Then, why does he say that?" I sat down across from her, lowering my voice. "Sometimes grown-ups say things because they're scared. Maybe he worries that if you care about me, it means you'll care less about him. But that's not true. You have enough love for both of us, and I'll never ask you to choose." Her shoulders relaxed slightly. She didn't say anything more, but in that silence, I saw something shift. It wasn't complete trust yet, but it was belief, a fragile seed that maybe, just maybe, I meant what I said. That night, after the kids went to bed, I sat with my partner and shared what happened. Her eyes filled with tears. "They're torn in the middle," she said softly. "It's not fair to them." And she was right. Children in blended families often carry a burden they never asked for, the burden of divided loyalty. And in that moment, I knew my role wasn't just to love them. It was to ease that burden, to carry some of it for them, even when it hurt. The real turning point came a few weeks later. My stepdaughter had a big school recital. Her dad was supposed to come, but at the last minute, he canceled. She was devastated. I found her in her room, sitting on her bed, tears rolling silently down her cheeks. My instinct was to rush in, to hug her, to promise her it would be okay. But I hesitated, unsure if my comfort would be welcome. So I knocked lightly and asked, "Do you want some company?" She nodded without looking up. I sat beside her, not speaking, just sitting in the silence. After a while, she whispered, "Why does he keep letting me down?" My chest ached, but I knew this was a moment I had to tread carefully. "Sweetheart," I said softly, "your dad loves you. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, but it doesn't mean they don't care. And it definitely doesn't mean you're not worth showing up for because you are." She sniffled, wiping her eyes. Then, almost timidly, she leaned against me. For the first time since I had entered her life, she let herself rest on my shoulder. My heart swelled. I didn't say anything more. I just sat there, holding space for her pain. And in that quiet, I realized something. Sometimes the greatest act of love isn't fixing the hurt, it's simply sitting with it. That night, when she went on stage for a recital, I was there in the audience, clapping louder than anyone. She looked out into the crowd, and for just a second, her eyes found mine. There was a flicker of gratitude, a silent acknowledgement that I had kept my promise. I was there when she needed someone. Afterward, she hugged me tightly in the hallway, in front of everyone. It wasn't about choosing me over her dad. It wasn't about filling a gap. It was about recognizing that love doesn't always come from where you expect, but it still counts. My stepson had his own breakthrough not long after. He had been struggling with a math test, frustrated and angry. He slammed his book shut, muttering, "I'm too dumb for this." My heart broke hearing those words. I sat beside him and said, "You're not dumb. You're just learning. And learning takes time." He rolled his eyes at first, but I kept going. "You know, when I was your age, I failed a math test too. I felt awful, but you know what? I got back up and I kept trying. And eventually, I figured it out." He glanced at me skeptically, but I saw a tiny spark of hope. We spent the next hour working through problems together. When he finally got one right, his whole face lit up. He shouted, "I did it!" And for the first time, he hugged me spontaneous, real, and full of joy. That hug was a turning point. It told me he didn't just see me as someone in the house. He saw me as someone in his corner, someone who believed in him when he doubted himself. But even as these moments of trust grew, the shadow of their dad lingered. Sometimes, after weekends with him, the kids would return distant, their walls built back up. I had to remind myself over and over, it's not about me. It's about their journey. Their dad will always be their dad, and that bond will always come first. And that's okay. My role isn't to compete, it's to support. One evening, as I tucked my stepson into bed, he whispered, I don't want to make Dad sad, but I like having you here too. Tears stung my eyes. I kissed the top of his head and said, you don't ever have to choose. Loving me doesn't take anything away from loving him. You have room in your heart for both, and that's exactly how it should be. That night, as I sat in the quiet of the living room, I thought about everything we had been through, the dinner that started it all, the painful words, the tears, the doubts, the breakthroughs, and I realized something. The apology they asked me to give wasn't about their dad at all. It was about them, about their fear, their guilt, their longing to love freely without hurting anyone else. And so, my choice not to apologize to their dad, but to apologize to them was the right one, because what they needed most wasn't a symbolic gesture to him. What they needed was reassurance from me that I wasn't here to take away, but to add, that I wasn't here to erase, but to love. And in that promise, I found my purpose as their step-parent. Not to be perfect, not to be their father, but to be someone who shows up, listens, and loves without conditions. Seasons changed, and with them, so did the rhythm of our lives. The kids grew a little older, a little wiser, and I grew with them. What started as a house divided by unspoken fears and uneasy silences began to feel more like a home, a real home. Not perfect, not without cracks, but stitched together by effort, patience, and love. Looking back, I realized that the journey wasn't about a single moment, a single argument, or even that night when they asked me to apologize to their dad. It was about hundreds of small, tiny threads that, when woven together, created something strong enough to hold us. It was in the quiet car rides, where music filled the gaps instead of words. It was in the late-night homework battles that ended with laughter. It was in the way they called my name when they needed help, without hesitation. But most of all, it was in the way they slowly, carefully, allowed me into their world, not as a replacement, not as an outsider trying to force a role, but as a steady presence they could count on. That, more than any apology, was the validation I had longed for. One afternoon, almost a year after that first painful dinner, we all sat down for lunch together. My stepdaughter suddenly asked, Hey, remember when we wanted you to say sorry to Dad? My heart stopped for a second. I wasn't sure where this was going. I braced myself. Then she smiled faintly and said, I think we were just confused. We thought liking you meant we were betraying him, but now we know it's not like that. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my emotions in check. I never wanted you to feel like you had to choose. Primera Saeed softly, your dad is your dad. He'll always be your dad, and I'll always respect that. But I hope you also know that my love for you is real, too. Her eyes glistened, and then, without warning, she stood and hugged me. It wasn't a tentative hug. It was full, tight, and certain. My stepson joined in, wrapping his arms around both of us. My partner sat watching, tears streaming down her cheeks, her hand covering her mouth. It was one of those moments where time feels suspended, where everything you befugged for everything you've endured suddenly makes sense. That hug wasn't just affection. It was acceptance. It was the kids saying, without words, you belong here. We see you. We trust you. Later that evening, my partner and I sat on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. She took my hand and whispered, Do you see now? They chose you, not instead of him, not against him, but with him. Because love isn't divide, it's multiplied. And she was right. That's the lesson I had been chasing all along. Stumbling through mistakes, second-guessing myself, fearing I had done too much or too little. The truth was simple. Love doesn't run out. It grows. And when you choose to love without keeping score, without demanding recognition, it comes back to you in ways you never expected. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought back to the original question that started this journey. Should I have apologized to their dad? At one point, I thought the answer was complicated, tangled in pride, hurt, and misunderstanding. But now, I see it clearly. The real answer is no. Because it was never about him. It was always about them, the kids. They didn't need me to bend my pride in front of their father. They needed me to bend my heart toward them, to show them that love isn't about replacing one person with another. It's about standing beside them, steady and unshaken, no matter how stormy things get. And maybe that's the greatest lesson of all. Being a step-parent isn't about titles or labels. It's not about whether they call you mom, or dad, or something else entirely. It's not about competing with the parent who came before. It's about showing up every single day. It's about being there for the big moments and the small ones, even when no one is watching, even when no one thanks you. It's about choosing to love, knowing full well that love might not be returned right away, or even at all. It's about planting seeds of trust and waiting patiently for them to grow, even if it takes months or years. It's about realizing that the reward isn't in recognition, it's in the quiet moments when a child leans on you, calls your name, or smiles, because they know you're theirs, too. And yes, it's hard. Blended families are messy, complicated, full of rough edges and fragile hearts. But they're also proof of resilience, of second chances, of the incredible capacity of love to expand beyond bloodlines. As I close this chapter of my story, I hold on to one truth. I didn't need to apologize to their dad to prove my worth. I needed to show my stepkids, through patience, presence, and love, that I wasn't there to take anything away. I was there to add, to give, to stand alongside them in every triumph, every heartbreak, every late-night talk, every tear, and every laugh. And in the end, that was enough. More than enough. Because the love we built together wasn't fragile, it was real. And no one, not even their father, could take that away. So, if you're listening to this, and you're walking a similar path, here's what I've learned. Don't waste your energy trying to prove yourself to everyone else. Don't chase approval from those who don't want to give it. Focus on the kids. Focus on the love you're building with them. Show up. Be consistent, and let time do its work. Because one day, when you least expect it, you'll feel those little arms wrap around you. Hear that, Keith. Thank you. Or see that look in their eyes that says, you matter to me. And in that moment, you'll know you didn't need an apology, or permission, or validation. You just needed to keep loving, and that was always enough.